we, on our agenda, have as our next point a joint debate on gender equality in the media sector. The rapporteur is Mrs. ŠOJDROVÁ. We're dealing here with gender equality in the media sector in the EU. And we also have an oral question to the Commission on empowering women and girls through the digital sector. This is on behalf of the Committee on Women's Rights and Equality. So first of all, I'd like to give the floor to the rapporteur, Mrs. ŠOJDROVÁ, for 4 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam President. Colleagues, I would like to present the report on equality between men and women in the media sector in the European Union, on which I have worked with my colleagues in the FAM committee, and I'd like to thank them. The European Parliament is well aware of the enormous influence of media on society. This is why the way that they work is of such interest to us. We know that the voice of women needs to be heard more clearly in all areas, including in the media. I am convinced that the media and society as a whole needs more influence by women, because women are just as talented as men. They represent 68% of journalists, and the pay gap between men and women amounts to 17%, and women are far less quoted when it comes to experts being quoted, and so only 20% of films are produced by women. So the representation of women on boards of media companies is only about 30%, and this disproportion affects content, the targeting of that media, and the basic organizational culture, and is often very much not helpful to managing to reconcile home and work life. It's a very competitive environment characterized typically by stress and very inflexible deadlines. So if we wish to retain and encourage women, we have to change the conditions that underpin work. The European Union standards require a framework for the operation of audiovisual services, laws to guarantee equality of opportunity in jobs and protection against discrimination, harassment and sexual abuse. But there are many other aspects that fall without the scope of this legislation, and we see that a solution is going to be requiring one where we better implement the legislation that we have rather than calling for further regulation. And we would appeal to member states and other actors within the sector to implement positive measures to bring about a more fair representation of women that might involve quotas. The European Union, in the European Union, we need more women on boards, and we need a benchmark in order to be able to achieve that. And monitoring would be helpful to ensure that professionals in the sector get proper training, men and women alike. We need to make sure that there are lists of women experts, just as we have with Expertalia in Belgium. Campaigns that call for a stop to sexist advertising, such as we've seen in the Czech Republic. We need the introduction of better work-life balance. So this report deplores sexism and sexual harassment in media. It notes that the European Parliament has called for bans on video on demand and video sharing platforms. We wish to see better representation of women in the media sector and better respect shown to women. So let me once again thank my colleagues and all of those that have worked on this, and we do hope that we'll be able to bring about a useful outcome from our work. Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. Now, for the authors of the oral question, Mrs. Rajewicz, gets the floor.
Bardzo Pani Przewodnicząca, Pani Komisarz. Digitalizacja.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Commissioner. Digitalization has contributed to a change in our daily lives. The methods of communications, the contents of professions are changing, and also access to services and new organization of work, which are available also to women, and to harmonize professional with personal life, as well as inequalities following gender differences. Digital economy requires particular skills which are easier available to men than to women. I point at the digital gender gap, which diminishes the contribution of women to those activities which require digital skills. This gap contributes to the decrease of opportunities for women in growing sectors of the economy with higher remuneration. Only 19% of managers in the ICT sector are women, compared with 45% in other service sectors. So the relatively small contribution of women to these growing professions are the result of gender segregation and gender stereotypes, which limit access of women to this sector, despite of women also being talented in the mathematical and ICT domains, to the detriment of the economy. Equal contribution of women and men would generate billions of euro to our economy in the sector, which suffers a deficit of workers, and it could enjoy the contribution of women who, compared to men, are underrepresented in this sector. Digitalization and the internet also contribute to formation of microfirms and SMEs, which offer opportunities to women who have to combine work with personal life, or women who live in distant localities. The internet facilitates sales of products and services, even with a small support from infrastructure and finance. New communications media also favor the development of expert networks. We know that women in the highly remunerated sectors could contribute to a reduction of the gender income and wage gap. So the experience which we can gain through the internet can be taken advantage of if we reduce this gender gap, allowing for a better promotion opportunity for women in the digital sector. In order to apply the digital economy to provide gender equality, we also have to be aware of the downsides, like easy availability to abuse and hate speech, for example, on the internet. Therefore, there is required also regulation preventing the dissemination of negative stereotypes against women in the web. To allow for a balance between work, rest and private life. Girls and boys should equally be encouraged to educate themselves in studies which provide qualifications for the most attractive professions. Therefore, we approve of the activity of the Commission promoting digital development. we stipulate a greater priority for employment of women in the ICT sector, including permanent education and long life learning. So what is the Commission doing in order to overcome the barriers to the development of such programs?
Frau Jourová, im Namen.
Thank you. On behalf of the Commission, Mrs. Jourová, you have the floor.
Madam President, honourable members, I would like to start by thanking the rapporteurs, Madam ŠOJDROVÁ and Madam KOZÐOWSKA-RAJEWICZ, as well as all the shadow rapporteurs for the excellent work with their reports. The report and the resolution we discussed today are very relevant and very timely. Allow me also to excuse my colleague Commissioner Maria Gabriel, who was not able to be here today, but who did not miss to follow your works and whose commitment towards promoting women's participation and representation in the digital, media and audiovisual sectors is very strong. Mobilising women and encouraging them to work in the digital field and to specialise in ICT is a needed step. Women make up less than 1 in 5 ICT graduates in the EU, and only 17% of the almost 8 million people working in ICT are women. We need to boost the involvement of girls and women in digital technologies. That is why the Commission started a reflection process on how to take a more strategic approach on women in digital as part of the Commission Digital Education Action Plan and the new Skills Agenda. The strategy proposes 3 ways to attract girls and women to take up science, technology, engineering and mathematics studies and go into ICT-related careers. First, it aims at challenging the gender stereotypes and bias towards women that persist in society and in the digital economy as well. We need to highlight role models and positive images of women in ICT. When it comes to the participation of women in media organisations or filmmaking, we can only agree with your report. Significant inequalities, including under-representation and career barriers, remain entrenched in the media sector. This is something that the European Commission is attentive to through the media pluralism monitoring, which shows that in the EU there are only few women on public service media boards. These findings are in line with other data, which show that despite over-representation of women among graduates in journalism and information, and despite a high number of women working in the media sector in Europe, women remain underrepresented in management positions in media. Only 1/3 of board membership of public broadcasters across the EU are held by women. And like in other areas, women are heavily underrepresented in the top-level positions, accounting only for 22% of board presidents. A similar picture arises when we look at filmmaking. Only 1 in 5 films is directed by a woman. And the reason is not that there are no women directors. The proportion of female directors graduating from film schools and entering the film industry is 44%. That is why the Commission wants action in the field too. Working through the media programme on gender for 2018, we shall track gender equality in the projects we are going to fund. The second area of the strategy focuses on skills and education. We need to make digital skills training accessible and attractive for women. In this area, the Commission has, for example, launched the Digital Skills and Jobs Coalition, which carried out a special call for concrete commitments by private companies and public institutions. In 2017, the Commission also awarded the European Digital Skills Awards to projects that encourage girls and women to take up digital skills and careers. Moreover, the Commission supports EU Code Week, which had 1.2 million participants last year, of which 46% were girls or women. The third area of the strategy focuses on promoting digital entrepreneurship for women and lowering the access barriers. The Commission has funded WeHubs, the first European community that connects business ecosystems and provides them with mentoring tools to support women entrepreneurs in the digital sector. Every year, the EU Prize for Women Innovators recognises outstanding women entrepreneurs and inspires others to follow in their footsteps. Honourable Members, the Commission is acting on several fronts in the effort to boost gender equality and empowerment. You know of the initiatives launched in the past years, the Gender Pay Gap Action Plan or the EU Social Pillar with its work-life balance agenda. At the same time, I will try again over this year to unblock in the Council the situation as regards the Women on Boards Directive. Another key priority is to end violence against women and girls. This is a particular challenge related to digitalisation, the online violence and harassment against girls and women. We are working through several strands to prevent violence, protect and support victims. I am pushing for a swift accession of the EU to the Istanbul Convention, which will provide a clear framework for our actions in this area. Overall, the European Commission is very pleased that the European Parliament shares our vision about the place of women in media organisations, as well as having in media a more diversified and realistic picture of the skills and potential of men and women in society. Thank you.
Dankeschön, Frau Kommissarin.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now, on behalf of the committees, the Employment and Social Affairs Committee, Mrs. Boylan, for 1 minute.
Thank you. I welcome this report and I thank the rapporteur for her work and for incorporating the employment opinion of which I was rapporteur. Women make up 68% of media and journalism graduates, yet less than 16% of the high-level strategic positions are occupied by women. This inevitably leads to a power imbalance. And this imbalance is exacerbated by the precarious nature of media work, leaving women more vulnerable to sexual harassment in the workplace. A recent international report found that 64.8% of female media workers have experienced intimidation or abuse, and almost 32% of that abuse was perpetrated by a male boss or co-worker. Media organisations need robust internal procedures to assist victims to speak out. To fundamentally reform the media sector, public and private media need to mainstream gender equality in all their content and avoid gender stereotypes and the sexual objectification of women. Pay and pension gaps must be closed and media companies must implement pay transparency. And it is also critical to note that women of different ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation and those with a disability face additional barriers to equality that must be addressed.
Thank you. On behalf of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament, Mrs. García Pérez has the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, women suffer from discrimination and inequality in all areas, and of course also when it comes to media and digital sectors. Therefore, these two reports are very welcome, where we refer to the need to encourage policies that will improve equality in these two fundamental areas. I welcome what the Commissioner said when she raised the importance of moving on with the legislation on women on boards, which is also very important. In Spain, women's faces are disappearing from television. Women's voices aren't heard on the radio. Women's writing is no longer in newspapers and magazines. We call the media the fourth pillar. we have to break the glass ceilings in the media as well. We need to make progress to ensure that we have fairer and more egalitarian societies, and policies like this have a fundamental role to play this. Women have to be the main driving force in these policies.
Thank you. For the European Conservatives and Reformist Group, Mrs. WIŚNIEWSKA has the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Digital change has reoriented the way people communicate and work. The information society provides great opportunities for creating wealth, and therefore we should take advantage of the opportunities which this brings to women. And the second aspect, that's gender equality in the media. Although there are more women than men studying media, but their employment is only at the level of 40%, and we have this crystal ceiling in the media. We should also note the issue of digital violence or cyber violence which exists, so there should be equal pay for equal work, and we should end with the sexually oriented perception of women and girls.
Thank you. On behalf of the Alliance for Liberals and Democrats in Europe, this is HYUSMENOVA for 1 minute.
Madam Chair, the essence of Madam ŠOJDROVÁ's report is about the equality of genders in the media. Focusing on this allows us to be specific in an area which is unknown to many colleagues. I believe that the proposal in the report to have equal representation in the decision-making process in media would be very beneficial. However, we need to do more in supporting gender equality in all areas. And in this regard, we can speak about the strategy presented by Commissioner Maria Gabriel about the digital sector and the equality there. I believe that this is where the future of Europe lies, and I believe that supporting the education in this area will help us overcome inequality between.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Greens European Free Alliance, Mr. Marcellesi for 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Media have a fundamental role to play. They can perpetuate gender stereotypes, or they can strive for equality. The European Parliament has to ensure we opt for the second option and to ensure more gender equality in the media. Today, a majority of audiovisual content, particularly adverts, seem to perpetuate gender stereotypes that are not healthy for children. They continue with stereotypes of women, of LGBT people, and promote images of women that promote anorexia and bulimia. We will continue to support our amendment in favour of a European directive to put an end to sexism in advertising. Economic motives can no longer be used as an excuse to perpetuate this discrimination in the media. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the Confederal Group of the European United Left, Nordic Green Left, Mr. Eck has the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, only 17% of journalists and newspapers are women. 9 of 10 interviews on TV are conducted by men. Statistically, in cinema and TV films in Germany, there are 2 lead characters who are male, 1 who's a female. 79% of experts tend to be men. Quiz and reality shows tend to be a male domain as well. Do you know how many German EU correspondents in private media are female? Well, there are 40 correspondents and only 10 are female. It's really high time that something is done for women's rights, and it shouldn't just be window dressing, because those responsible in editorial and film studios can see that something's wrong but don't want to change it. We have to come up with clear political statements for a binding quota on the presence of women in TV and newspaper news organisations.
Thank you. On behalf of the European Nations of Freedom Group, Mrs. TROSZCZYNSKI, you have 1 minute 30. Thank you very much, Madam. This report on the equality of the sexes in the media is a waste of time. We've heard that we've got a risk to women and children about pornography. It's quite right that maternity is a synonym of discrimination when it comes to taking people on, and the principle of equal pay for equal work is still a fantasy. But it's far worse after that, because it seems that it's only based on statistics. The statistics for people working in the media allow you to say that they're being discriminated against, either because, as you say, there's going to be a need for quota. Well, quota, I can tell you, don't work. It's not simply because that 50% of people are women in a particular area that means that women will be equal of men. This is not to be measured by statistics. You have another solution, which is to change people's mindsets in the media, and this is where the text, we think, becomes very worrying, because that isn't going to create anything other than stereotypes that will denigrate women. Now, we could get rid of those roles where we see anything about a stereotype, a nurse or a secretary or even a mother of a family. None of these should be pinned onto women in the media domain. It will bring them into discredit, as if this had been the cause of their distress. And there's a few lobbyists which are trying to push this forward, trying to turn girls into women, to boys and boys into girls. So the primary point here that needs to prevail over all the rest is the freedom of choice. In the media, as in many other sectors in society, we MEPs have to keep one thing in mind, that is that each person must have the possibility to choose freely for themselves, personally and professionally, which paths they wish to go down. When it comes to quota and the re-education of people's consciences, only 40% of women would work in media, it would appear. I prefer to have complementarity between men and women. I prefer freedom of choice. I prefer equality of rights.
Thank
you very much. Now, for the non-attached, Mr. Sośnierz, for 1.5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, this report and this debate looks like an awful misunderstanding. It's all about sexism, because you want to use gender as a criterion for giving somebody a job. It's not our job to decide who decides whom in his own business. Business freedom doesn't mean what you think is right. We must agree that sometimes people will do what you don't think is right, but it's not your business. If you have a better idea of how business should be run, you should set up a business, employ your own people, and then prove that it works. And if you are right, then you will be competitive. But as long as you don't run the costs of running a business, then don't intervene. Because if you cause losses to these businesses, you will not then pay the price. So don't intervene, because of what you're saying is very arbitrary and without justification.
Now, Ms. Rodrigues, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam Commissioner, equality is crucially important for democracy and the respect for human dignity. No one expected the media, social communication media, social media, would work to make discrimination worse. Everyone thought they were going to improve the situation. This report, despite all the work that was carried out and all the positive aspect that it has in it, could do even better, my group thinks. It will be better with the amendments which we've put forward included in it. We want more regulation at national and European level. We want to be able to levy fines and have a kind of ombudsman for gender equality questions. We want to have binding measures for equal pay, for equal work, and we want to make certain that anyone putting forward or promoting gender-based violence through advertising or any other method or could be punished. And let's please ask colleagues to vote on those things tomorrow. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. KÖLMEL, for 1 minute. Thank you very much, Madam President. Now, I'm all for promoting women in those areas in which they are disadvantaged. However, we need to be at pains to make sure that we do not turn equality of opportunity into equality of outcomes, because that would be the wrong way, and that is why I am opposed to rigid quotas. I don't want a situation in which 50% of positions are filled by women, 50% by men. Instead, I would like us to have 100% of the best candidates and make sure that they are awarded the positions, and that should be our objective. When we're having these kinds of debates, we should not forget that we are not only talking about professional qualifications. We also need to look at balance within families and make sure that work within families is properly recognized, and we don't want to make a kind of situation where you find it impossible to reconcile family and work life. So yes, I'm all for equality of opportunity, but we can't all be the same. Ms. Ward, you have 1 minute.
The equal pay scandal at the BBC is yet another reminder that no sector is immune to gender inequalities. Following Carrie Gracie's public denouncement, the extent of the pay differences between men and women in media and entertainment in the UK has been truly exposed. But we know this is true everywhere in Europe and in all sectors. The creative and cultural sector, historically seen as female-friendly, where women outnumber men across the sector as a whole, is a sector guilty of gender-based discrimination. However, pay gap is not the only issue. In a world of images and narratives, positive representation of women is key to combat prejudice and encourage necessary mind shifts. As a cultural activist and as a feminist, I see a link between the way women are represented in our society and consequential gender-based violence. When women are absent from the public sphere, they are disempowered, objectified, and are prone to violence. When women are represented according to patriarchal prejudices and stereotypes, a culture of bullying and violence prevails. And that's why we need women in decision-making positions in the media sector, as in all sectors.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to the Catch the Eye part of the evening. And Ms. Petir has the floor for 1 minute, first of all.
Thank you. Madam Commissioner, according to the available data, women are still not equally represented in the media. They are not equally paid, nor are they consulted on expert matters in the manner their male counterparts are. The research shows that only 4% of news coverage actually is accounted for equal representation of men and women. Women and girls account only for 24% of the media content, in comparison to 76% dedicated dedicated to men and boys. It is precisely for these reasons that this report carries special weight. However, I would advise caution. This report has to be approached in a responsible manner without imposing socially constructed ideologies on member states. And I have to say that some of the amendments are geared towards this purpose. I call upon you to reject them. They undermine the importance of the topic, and they actually draw attention to a matter which is not in exclusive competence of the EU. Empowerment of women and girls in our society in general and in the media is the key role of the EU, but it can be achieved without any breach of powers and competences of member states.
Thank you very much indeed, President. Commissioner, digitalisation has profoundly changed the media sector. This is an opportunity for women to make their own voices heard loudly and to achieve more at the workplace, whilst recognising work-life balance. Across many sectors, there is still a gulf between men and women where the digital industry is concerned. Amnesty International has done a study which has shown that there is actually still a lot of sexism, discrimination, online bullying and aggression against women. So it's absolutely indispensable that the Member States and the Commission tackle this issue of digital literacy. Girls, young girls and women must be taught how to be more digitally literate, because this is a vital skill in the labour market. It's absolutely vital too that there are awareness-raising campaigns adopted too, because we need to tackle violence and discrimination against women so that finally they can be able to use the internet more safely, and so that society as a whole is better trained as to how to use the media in a more aware way. Thank you.
Mr. Marias.
Thank you, Madam President. It's a fact that the voice of women isn't heard in the mass media, and it emerged from this debate that there is a small number of women in management positions in the media. They make less money than men, and they're not playing the role they need to play in the media. And this, of course, has an impact on the content and the way that the media functions. We need to look at the key aspect of the media, its oversight, or control rather, by oligarchs, which brings us things like fake news. That's why, Commissioner Jourová, a year before the Euro elections, you need to make sure that there is pluralism in the media. All political groups need to be able to make their voices heard during the Euro election campaign. So we need to speak out for pluralism, and of course we support all of these measures to bring women in great equality in the media.
Thank you very much.
Gracias, Presidenta. Gracias, Comisaria, por todo su trabajo y esfuerzos.
Thank you very much indeed. I should like to thank everyone involved for all their efforts. Now, the traditional breakdown of roles means that women tend not to be as keen on engaging in studies linked to new media. This is what the Commissioner has told us. However, this sector offers a high degree of employability. Nevertheless, it does not seem to win women's attention enough, and that is why they are underrepresented. Now, if we look at the content and services providers and try and make a success of this, we have to do more research into what is keeping women away from these kinds of activities, and perhaps do more in early childhood to encourage women to move into technological fields, and also make sure that these services are better targeted to a female audience. Finally, we make sure that women take advantage of one of the main sources of employment in years to come. Thank you very much. Ms. Engström, please, for 1 minute.
Tack, fru ordförande, fru kommissionär. Kim Wall.
Thanks, Madam Chairman, we've got people who have been murdered, investigative journalists in Malta, and people who have paid for their work with their lives. The hatred of women in certain sections of the media is notable, and it's led to a whole cheapening of the media. Sexist comments have got worse. They've always been with us, but they got worse and worse in recent years, partly because of the growth of the internet. We need to fight against these phenomena to protect our democracy and to allow everybody to play a role in the media sector, which in turn has repercussions for the whole of society. Equality in the workplace, you need to be able to have a family and have a job. These conditions in the media at the moment are making it very difficult from women to progress, or sometimes even to stay in the sector. Finally, we need to stop selling things by using the bodies of young girls or women.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lopez, please.
Thank you, Madam President. The report talks about aspects of inequality in the media sector, as well as violence against women, sometimes promoted by the media. This is also happening in social media. The primacy of the private over the public sector is helping these things happen. They obviously have an impact on the content because they are coloured by the political views of the people who control them. So the fight against inequality between men and women means changing the practices in the sector, which are giving huge amounts of extra work. They're making people's hours of work longer. They're forced to carry out jobs that are not always appropriately trained to do, just to maximise profit. These are policies promoted by the union as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Zammit, please.
Madam President, I think that is very relevant through this discussion, that this discussion today is exactly 6 months since the journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, who was assassinated in Malta. This report highlights on women investigative journalists, including Caruana Galizia, who are continually subjected to violence and attacks due to their work. Daphne used to be subjected to systematic attacks from the present government. She was portrayed as a witch, and government exponents also tried to shut her mouth by means of a good number of legal suits and by means of garnishing orders, and to downplay all that she wrote about, even on personal comments about her as a woman. We are sure that Daphne Caruana Galizia was a force against all this, because she was the best investigative journalist in Malta, so much so that today there is a consortium of 45 journalists hailing from 18 media organizations who are going to continue her work.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tomašić.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Women and men must... Thank you, Madam President. Women and men must have the same opportunities. All discrimination present in the market must disappear, and I will always wholeheartedly support all measures going in that direction. However, this report goes in an entirely opposite direction, and it does not call for equal opportunities. It calls for equal outcomes, which would not be a result of free individual choice, but the result of a decision of social engineering. So it actually leads to women being pushed into some preset roles. Some feminists said that women are free to do whatever they choose with their bodies. Nowadays, they want to abolish the freedom of choice of women who have been objectivized in their opinion, and they actually harm their interests and go directly against their free will. So this report goes precisely in that direction, and this is why I cannot support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Anna Miranda, please.
Thank you, Madam President. If female journalists stop working, then journalism will stop as well. So this is a very important debate, because 37% of women are working of people in the media are women, and the number of women in the higher echelons of the media is much lower. Only 8%, for example, are actually lead commentators in the media. But these aren't the only problems. One is the question of precarious work that women are obliged to carry out, the result of a patriarchal setup in an area that's completely made over to men. It's important also that we look at things like sexual harassment and harassment in the workplace, as well as a patronizing attitude inside and outside the workplace. We need to get rid of these sexist practices. We, men, male and female politicians, need to look at reality, and we need to do something about these kinds of activities and also deal with sexist advertising as well. Thanks very much indeed, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Now, the Commissioner, please.
I think that the discussion has shown that we share the same vision and we have a very significant role to play. Let me add a few comments based on the discussion which I have just listened very carefully. On digitalization, we have a tendency to say that the digitalization is a great opportunity for the society, and it must be an opportunity for the women as well. This is a positive vision. I will add a negative view. If we do not support women and girls to get into the digital sphere as professionals, as experts, we will undertake very serious risk, because digitalization has the potential to increase the gaps in society, and we have to actively work against this. That's why the Commission, as I described at the beginning, is undertaking a lot of steps and is funding a lot of projects to boost the potential of women and to encourage the young girls to study the relevant subjects. This is the problem in practice. I have many debates with the captains of IT industry, because thanks to other parts of my portfolio I am in a very frequent contact with the managers of big IT companies, and I urge them to give more chances, at least equal opportunities for the women to get to higher positions and to get better jobs. And they keep convincing me that the women are not in the pipeline. And I always say, but they do not have to be technicians or programmers or specialists for IT, for the technologies. They can be marketing experts, they can be lawyers employed in IT sector. I think this is also the way to get the women to this very promising and emerging sector, and also, among other things, to get to higher positions, to the better paid jobs, and to in order to decrease the pay gap, because I think that we are working on several different things here. On media, we are witnessing a very varying trend, because online hate speech and violence online is now more and more discouraging women journalists to do their jobs. We have statistical figures that show that the women are much higher victims and targets of online violence than men. Simply, the attackers recognize the women as the weaker part of the society, and that's why they are attacked more frequently. And I had many, again, debates with the IT industry. We are urging the IT companies to delete hate speech against many groups of our societies, including women. I am urging law enforcement authorities in all the member states to react and to find the perpetrators, to find the attackers and to punish them, because online violence is a huge problem of the whole society, and it is very negatively affecting already the freedom of work of journalists, especially women. And we have to be better in this, because this is a very serious problem. Last comment, I want to explain my approach to the quota, which has been discussed here as well. My approach is that the women must be ensured that there is fair competition. I said many times that positive discrimination for me is not the option, but we have to ensure that there will be fair competition. If the people, the candidates are equally qualified, if they have similar experience, I don't see any reason why the men should always get the priority. There should be fair competition. I am repeating it for the third time. But I think that if we manage this, it will be not good for women. It will be good for society, because our labour market, our IT sector, our other promising sectors need more talents, and we need to use the potential of women for the good of the whole society. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this debate. Again, I want to thank the rapporteurs for attracting our attention to these very important topics, and I am ready to cooperate with the Parliament in the future, because we have to join forces. We have also to encourage the Member States, but also the universities, the politicians on all levels, the opinion leaders, because I think that to achieve what we want to achieve in the field of gender equality, we need also to change the mindset of our society, and there is much more work to be done. Thank you very much.
Köszönjük szépen, biztos asszony. És most végül pedig megadnám a szót Šojdrová asszonynak, az előadónknak.
Thank you very much, Ms. Šojdrová, the rapporteur. Please go ahead.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. I should like to thank everyone who has taken part in the debate this evening. Thank you much for sharing your views as well as your critical remarks. My thanks also go to the Commissioner. I should like to thank you for all your hard work and all your effort in attempting to bring about reconciliation of family and working lives. So thank you very much for all your efforts. Now, men and women complement one another, and if we therefore want to increase the quality of media, then we need to up the share of women working in the media, because we no longer want to lose out on the potential of women in the media. To my mind, the Member States, as well as the European Union, share responsibility for this. We should try and open up opportunities and improve conditions for women in exercising their freedom of choice. That is down to us. And that is precisely what our report talks about, this freedom of choice and freedom of opportunities. So I once again like to thank everybody who took part in the report.
A vita lezárásához egy állásfoglalási indítványt kaptam a női esélyek.
A motion for a resolution has been tabled by the Women's Committee, but that concludes this evening's debate. Thank you very much for that. So now we move on to the next item of business this evening, Enrique Guerrero Salom, on the implementation of the Development Cooperation Instrument, humanitarian